like to welcome everybody to the March 24th meeting of the CNY Solidarity Coalition. The normal agenda is we start out by acknowledging that we are living on the land of the Haudenosaunee Confederation, and we need to keep that in our minds and hearts as we move through this world. We usually start with announcements, and I call if there are any announcements to be made.
His name is John Deere, and he's written a book called The Gospel. He's a peace activist and author and a Nobel Prize nominee. And he's coming to Syracuse to talk about and sign copies of the book. It's going to be April 18th at 7 p.m. at St. Lucie.
Thank you. Any other announcements, Brent?
Yeah, I left some literature on the table. The entrance that there's a coalition of organizations working to have the Syracuse County Council have a ceasefire, resolution, ceasefire in Gaza, and then part of the war that Israel has brought to them. And they're working on that, and it's possible for maybe a first meeting in the county council. So there's a few pieces of literature regarding that, and I think there's a contact on some of the.
Yeah, I got something to talk about, but I'll do it after the presentations, if that's okay.
There are some leaflets on the table from New York Renews. Andro Manis is one of our folk supporters, dropping off today. And this is in the newsletter. Please call, if you are a constituent, Magnarelli and Hunter this week. This is critical to try to get New York Renews passed. Magnarelli is not going to budge probably because that's who he is, but he needs the phone calls reminding him. And Hunter's pretty responsive, so a few more phone calls might just do it. So please look for this New York Heat Act reminder in the newsletter on Tuesday and make that phone call. Thanks.
Thank you. The first presenter is Greg Michael, who is the Executive Director of the Onondaga Earth Corps.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dick, for inviting Onondaga Earth Corps to be with you today. And thank Ann Kornbluth, who has been a long-term board member with Onondaga Earth Corps and I think a friend of you all. So yeah, my name is Greg Michael. I'm the Executive Director of the Onondaga Earth Corps, which is a youth conservation corps program that started here on the south side of Syracuse in 2003 conceptually. 2004 was the first summer that we started our program. Just a show of hands of folks that are familiar with Onondaga Earth Corps. I would say a fair number of folks. So I'll kind of give you the breezy tour of who we are, our origins, how we're structured now. That has evolved over the years, just so you have a sense of, if you know young people in the community that might benefit from working with us, or if you have a project idea, you might like to collaborate with us. You can see that, but then I give a few updates about some of the exciting things that are coming up for our program, and leave some space for questions. So I'm gonna stand here so I can see. I think the title I gave Dick was a little bit different than this, but jobs, justice, and youth, I think is what I had said would be the focus, and I think that's true. But really, our mission is empowering young people, and we do that through engaging with amazing people in coalitions like this, community partners, and through environmental conservation work. We have a very grassroots beginnings. Eli McDonald, who was the building superintendent at the Dunbar Center, was doing landscaping in the community, and some of the local foundations were working on revitalization of the South Side back in the early 2000s. And some folks put their heads together with Eli, and there's a photo of him and the crew. This is the earliest photo we have, but they bought some tools, they hired some young people, and they started having an immediate impact by cleaning up vacant lots. This is the corner of Midland and Calvin, right across from the corner store. That was kind of a place where there was civilian going on. They converted that into a community entrance to the neighborhood, and that is still there today. So the South Side has many problems that communities of disinvestment face around the country. And that's where they started, between I-81 and Midland, in between Castle Street and Bellevue. That was like the target area. You needed to live there and be a young person in that neighborhood, and facing many barriers to be in the program. So those are our beginnings. And then in the second, third years of the program, there were folks who were familiar with the Civilian Conservation Corps. Everyone familiar with the Civilian Conservation Corps? So in the 1930s, and here locally too, at Green Lake State Park, many of our city parks had projects that put young people to work through the Civilian Conservation Corps, doing environmental restoration work on our natural lands, helped build a lot of the park infrastructure, both locally and all across the country. So we have like really neighborhood-based roots in Eli and the South Side. And in 2005, folks said, can we work together with you, Eli, and integrate this national model of service and conservation? And they changed the name actually from the Eli McDonald Green Team, with Eli's permission, to the Onondaga Earth Corps. So we're one of over 130 programs across the country that follow the Conservation Corps model, and the best practices. So there's a map. I actually spent all week in Washington drinking more Kool-Aid of the Conservation Corps world. It's really amazing. So there are a lot of programs like ours that are very grassroots, and would be considered a local corps. There are some, the California Conservation Corps is funded by the California Bottle Bill, and they just give money. They fund corps all across the state with that. So they have state funding at a level, a scale we've never seen, and programs throughout the state. There are some that are urban. There's some that are really rural, doing fire prevention work out west, and so they kind of take on the communities that they operate in. Some of them are actually regional, so operating in multiple states. So in that landscape, we're always learning from other programs. There's some really cool stuff going on in New York City, in Philadelphia, where we can tap into those best practices. In 2022, a very exciting thing for our program, we became accredited by the Core Network. And so if you're familiar with the Better Business Bureau, the Core Network is kind of the stamp of approval for conservation force, both from like a governance perspective, your operations, your mission, how you're funded, all of those things kind of help corps that want to grow into those practices guide their programs. So that was a big deal, and Anne was on our board when we accomplished that. How many of you have teenagers in your life? Judgment of young people, like when we're young, we're growing into a new level of decision making, and often when we think of teenagers, have all the teenagers in your life making the best, most sound decisions? So, if you put that lens over an urban setting where you have a lot of young people of color, we think the perception that's out there is very inaccurate, and we think that in our program, and young people in the city have a very different story to tell when you see in the news about young people. It is a time when people are growing into maturity, they're taking more risks. those risks for young people, especially young people of color, are disproportionately changing their lives in an adverse way. So when I was young, you know, I took risks, I had fun, I made mistakes, but the consequences of that for young people in our city can be very different than, you know, I grew up in lots of places, but, you know, the consequences are very different for young people of color in our communities. But we're working with them for them to flip the script, so to speak. And here are a few shots of our young people, some of them taken during the pandemic. But we see young people as a fountain of opportunity to change community from within, from themselves, but also in partnership with community members and community groups like CNY Solidarity. You know, when you look at the history of policy within Syracuse and across the country, I'm sure you're all familiar with redlining. This is a map of Syracuse, and the south side would fall, I don't have a pointer, but you know, in that area where you've got the yellow and the red coming together, and you know, the streetscapes in those neighborhoods, some of these buildings are torn down already. But there's been decades of neglect in communities that were redlined and yellow lined. And those are the spaces in which we're employing young people to transform those areas. The overlay with forestry is interesting because if you look at maps of our tree canopy and tree cover in Syracuse, you can see there's a similar disparity. So young people in our community don't have access to all of the health benefits of trees, the environmental benefits of trees, and American Forests has come out with a tool that looks at communities from this lens of tree equity. And it's looking at canopy cover, population density, income, employment opportunities, race, age, health metrics, and in some ways, they've created a language for programs like ours that caught a lot of attention from our local officials that, like, what are we doing about tree equity? We've been doing it for 20 years. But now this tool helps you kind of hone in and focus on, you know, which neighborhoods have lower canopy, which have, you know, socioeconomic factors that need to be addressed. And so we've been using this language and lens to identify and target our tree planting efforts and providing young people in those neighborhoods jobs to go out and identify the sites that are being planted and actually do the work to get paid. We are very experience-based. All of our training is hands-on. So, you know, youth come in and get the technical stuff, but in a hands-on way. So you can just see a few shots of us walking the neighborhoods to kind of look at the neighborhood with a lens that's different than when you might be walking to school or back. If you've been a young person in Syracuse, you might not be looking at the trees. So we take them to those spaces and give a new lens for the neighborhood. We're also doing scientific inquiries. You can see us measuring air quality up in one of those shots there. Looking at species diversity down in the bottom left, and actually going for a hike in the snow. This is probably a similar time several years ago during our orientation when we don't know if it's going to be snowing or 70, but hiking out in the snow. So when we first started, we had youth in our programs, ages 15 to 18. As young people started to age out, they were asking for more opportunities. So they're like, we're not done yet, Greg. So from that, we started to grow our programming, and I can show you with our young adults, but The youth programming is after school and on Saturdays in the spring and fall. And then in the summer, we'll have up to 40 young people dispersed at multiple locations. Mostly our city parks or our own location, sometimes in partnership with other youth serving organizations. So you can see there folks making videos that explain the benefits of green infrastructure with OEC-Man, the caped green wigged superhero, assembling, learning how to build a green roof, but on the ground in the bottom right, and then learning how to survey air quality up there. So a lot of environmental science, a lot of engagement with community, and after school and on Saturday. So from that, we grew into our young adult program, which serves 19 to 25-year-olds. And these folks are actually starting next Monday, we'll be bringing on a cohort of 12 young adults, and they will go through basic training in tree planting, tree maintenance, green infrastructure maintenance, community outreach, and actually I didn't add it on here, but we've also been doing a lot of work in our parks, natural areas, so invasive species removal and reforestation. So they kind of get a mix of training, and then they get put into a crew that specializes in one of those areas. And you can see our crews leading volunteers on the left in a community tree planting, and then in the right doing maintenance on some of the green infrastructure sites that have been designed to capture stormwater. So again, our crew members are like, we're not done. So we continue to develop this pathway. We now have an advanced program for folks who are really geared and interested in careers in forestry and natural resources. So after they've completed our young adult program, they can advance into the advanced program where they're doing kind of higher level skill set work. The first crews, they did structural pruning of street trees. So all of the young trees you'll see on your drive home, when they're young, you can save money and set up good habits for those street trees by pruning them. So they're out there doing that, and it's pretty technical level work. So they do that, and they also take on a series of really advanced level projects, including leading and acting as the consultants for our urban forest master plan. So instead of a consultant from Davie Resource Group or me, it's young people from the community that have helped shape that outreach and lead our master plan process. So there was our first crew on the left in front of panels that they created for our master plan, and then our pruning tools on the right. So I think I'll fly through the next set of these, but our program is learn and earn. So our crew members aren't volunteers, they're getting paid. We learned this last week, they probably get paid the highest wages of Conservation Corps members across the country. So they're making, this year they'll be making over $19 an hour as a young adult member. Our youth members get minimum wage, and then our advanced young adult members make a little bit more than that. And then we're working with them on their development path. So not all of them want to go into forestry at our young adult level. So while they have stable income, while they're meeting weekly with our staff, thinking about their future goals, they're preparing themselves for the next steps. There they are on the left, going for a hike at Green Lakes and learning about the park, which many of them have never visited. On the right, they're doing yoga, just learning how to a different way to decompress from the week. We also have really good partnerships on the technical front. You can see us with National Grid there, having crew members take a ride in a bucket truck, learning about utility line clearance, learning how to climb trees. And then off on the right, working with a local landscape company, learning about hardscape as a potential option. It's often project-based, but we were one of the only organizations that was, you know, primarily a local hire on tree planting along the creek walk. But when we have those opportunities and we can squeeze it into the budget, they're learning how to operate small equipment, dingoes, backhoe. So that's exciting. And then also, you know, our young people are our community ambassadors. We were proud to have our young people at the ribbon cutting for the creek walk that runs through the south side. But we were able to leverage an opportunity for conservation corps to be on that. This is just a seasonal look, those arrows. Each season we kind of convene with the crew to make sure they're still growing in the program. And if they're ready to move on to other opportunities, we're offboarding them into other job opportunities or other training programs. Like someone wants to do construction, you know, there are other programs that I think we're gonna hear more about jobs from our other presenter, but Syracuse has a lot of training resources and programs, and if this isn't it for them, we're connecting them with other opportunities. The kinds of things we do, project-wise, we're focused on urban forestry, and it looks like leading community plantings or pruning trees. If you're familiar with Save the Rain, through that program, we planted about, not just us, but contractors of the city have planted close to 10,000 trees over the last 10 years, a little more than 10 years. It's really changed the landscape for trees in the city. We're actively engaging with community members. This is what it looks like planting in front of somebody's home. Our crews are teaching people at ESF how to do outreach in the community. So that's Jay, who just went with me to DC, but she's leading the urban forestry class and telling them about the work that we do. This is just another shot of that urban forest master plan. And some of our work has been highlighted nationally around a whole new movement with tree equity and creating a pre-apprenticeship pathway for young people to do urban forestry. Another major project area is green infrastructure maintenance. This is our Comstock. It's our crews that are out there for good or for bad. So if you see anything that needs a little TLC, our crews are doing that. And more recently, we've been involved with restoration in natural areas. As I mentioned, the photos you see here, at least on the left, is the creek walk. Massive swaths of invasives all along that corridor, but we've been clearing and replanting native species, but also in some areas just not necessarily putting back trees, but putting in low grow vegetation that can fill the area and leave some view sheds, as we've heard a lot from our community partners about, you know, line of sight for safety in some of the neighborhoods we're working. Schiller Park, we've been slowly removing 12 acres of buckthorn and sometimes doing it by hand with hand saws, and then the city's also been able to get some support for National Grid to come in with equipment to do that, and also engaging the community. This is at Schiller to learn about, you know, why it is we're doing that work, and also doing some restoration work. This is out at Oneida Shores Park, where a lot of ash trees came down due to the emerald ash borer, and replanting in those areas. A couple of shots from parks in the city. I mentioned we're out in the parks, not only doing this project work, but educating kids in those spaces about the work that we're doing. And we also have crews that are focused on litter pickup And also surveying community members about how they can be involved. And I think the last two slides here is, we've been doing, when I first started doing this, you walk down South Salina, there are no trees, no rain gardens. And so we would compare that to a well-canopied street, say on Allen Street, or we would walk in the suburbs where a cornfield had been converted into a new housing area. But it's amazing now, everywhere we go, there's a project that has been implemented by young people in the community. You can say, your predecessor did this. What do you want to do? So it's been amazing to see that over the years, and we have crew members who come back and they can talk about the tree that they planted in their neighborhood. And yeah, snow, we might be planting the snow tomorrow. Snow, rain, or shine, we're out there getting the job done. And if Tay, who there's some really good videos on our website if you want to see some of our crew members talking about it from their perspective, which is way more compelling than hearing it from me. Just talking about the impact that it's had on them, just being in a supportive environment, doing work where you can see a visual change right away, where you learn about the environmental impact, something you maybe never thought of before. But the relationships that get built when they are in a leadership role, and people in the community see them not as that teenager that's up to no good, but a young person that's creating positive change, really impacts their self-esteem, helps them think about where they want to go while they're putting some money in their pocket. And so we just turned 20 years old last year. Some of the exciting things that are happening is, Department of Labor has these kind of defined career pathways, and we've always been more focused on making immediate impact with young people and connecting them with community, but we're going to be developing a pathway that's in line with the Department of Labor standards as part of the U.S. Forest Service grant that was awarded to the city of Syracuse. So that's hopefully going to be underway this year. We also recently moved. When I started this program, we operated out of Eli's truck in my Subaru. So we've grown our capacity. We now have several trucks and trailers, and now we're in our own space right next to On Point for College. So had this gradual growth, and turned 20 and have new resources so that we can amplify our impact. And on the urban forestry front, there's the governor just announced that New York's going to plant 20 million or 25 million trees in the next 10 years. So there are a lot of people who are looking at our program and saying, okay, how do we do this? So we're kind of being called to help navigate that. So we're both nervous and excited about the new opportunities. Yeah, so happy to answer any questions.
Well, first, bravo, congratulations, you're awesome. I'm really inspired by all that you've shared. I'm going to ask 3 hopefully quick questions, and then you can just answer them. If OEC didn't exist, would most of this work be done by the DPW or other? The funding, I think you just said it, but I wasn't sure, like, where does your funding come from for payment as well as operations? And I also know I'm good friends with Emmanuel Carter from ESF. So I know he's been working on, like school forests, right, in urban areas, right? So these schools, and I know Mayor Walsh is all for that. And I think it has a green light to move forward. And I was just wondering if any of these youth will be working, hopefully maybe in their former schools, right? Or present schools, to really be planting, and it's a huge amount of trees. I don't remember the numbers, so I don't want to stay it out here, but I'm hoping that they will be part of that. Thanks.
Yeah, so if Earth Corps was not doing this work, it would probably be contracted out to the tree care world. And probably it would be less community involved. And probably a lot less of it would happen. So this, and our funding is, we have city funding, county funding. We go after private grants for capacity. We have some state funding. So it's a rated funding, we like to call it. The city does also plant a lot of trees through a private contractor, who's amazing. It's been a small company that's outside of the city. And the current model that the city has is to leverage funding and community input in forestry, so that like somebody just shows up to your house and plants a tree and disappears. It's a different experience than if young people that live there are knocking on your door, making sure that a tree can go there, and there's employment opportunities, and then also volunteer opportunities to be engaged with the trees in the community. And so that's the model that the city is promoting. Then you asked about schools. So we work closely with Manuel Professor Carter. The student who wrote his thesis on community trees worked with our crews for a number of years before he went to grad school. His name is Justin Kwiatkowski. So we're familiar with all of the plans, and we're excited they're going to happen. Whether or not we're a part of like the delivery or the outreach, we're not too sure yet. But we can keep a inner ear about it. Well, did I answer the other?
I saw that you had personal development every week. What kind of training do you do?
So, I mean, some of it is basic job readiness skills, learning how to relax, conflict resolution. We're working to expose crew members to other entities that are in the community. So sometimes, like On Point for College will come in and talk about, pathways through their programming to connect with their resources for, helping you to get into college, not only get in, but then to stay in college. So we have guest speakers will go on adventures. Some of it is youth driven, so or community driven. We've had a number of years where there's violence is happening all the time, and it's real for the crew members in our program. So we, OGs Against Gun Violence might come in to talk to us. So there's kind of your mental fitness, physical fitness, financial fitness, financial literacy, those kinds of things. So we kind of have some core things that we're always touching on, and then other things as arise for the young people in the program.
Any more questions, Eric?
Rick, I just want to add to all the compliments you've already got. Very impressive. I want this is technical thing to the side. One of the slides listed ash restoration. Now, is that putting trees or ashes work, or doing something with ash? New ones.
So for the full details on that, I would refer to Onondaga County Soil and Water Conservation District, who's been implementing their ash plans. But basically, thousands of ash trees have been cut down in county parks that are within targets. Mostly on the forest edge near ball fields. Like if it's in the woods and it's going to die, they're just leaving it. But at Oneida Shores, they remove thousands of trees. And so Soil and Water mostly has been working on the design of replanting in those spaces, and we've been the ones that have been planting trees. So sometimes it may not mean exactly where the ash fell, or are going to. Sometimes it's in different areas of the park, but the idea is to restore canopy where Emerald Ash Borer has made ash trees down.
And that wasn't referred to a existing plan.
No. They also have some treatment that they're doing on trees they know they want to save. So they, you know, a select few are being treated to survive.
I want to thank you.
Quick question?
Yeah,
So clearly it's on your program. It's fabulous. Where do you recruit your students? Are you going to just the city school? You going to the government?
So it's mostly through, so for our high school age kids, it's mostly going to high school counselors, community centers, and our recruiting is really targeted on young people in the city who have a lot of barriers. In the summer, we employ through CMI Works. We have had some people that are coming in from Liverpool as part of that if they're income eligible. We also have an AmeriCorps program that is very small, and sometimes that'll be kids who are service-minded. Sometimes ESF students who are very intrigued in what we do and want to be part of it. But that's a limited kind of subset because we don't want, if we did that, we could very well, like a lot of conservation programs, have a bunch of college age folks who maybe don't need the opportunity as much as our core community.
One really quick question. So you mentioned on point and going perhaps to college, but you know, a lot of these kids I work with, you know, they don't want to go, they can't go to college. So are there pathways, are you working with entities who can receive them because they already have experience, which is great, right? Will there be, those who are really interested in pursuing this, will there be an ability to do that without college?
Yes, yeah, so landscaping, forestry, and we're, you know, a lot of our crew members don't want to be arborists. And so that's like, we've been called to this whole interest around forestry and landscaping. And so, you know, Michael Grin or some of the employers will be like, well, we'll take a bunch of them. And we do have people that do that, but we have a lot of them who are like, I want to be a musician, or I want to go into construction. And so many of them aren't ready just to go work on I-81. You know, after 8 months in our program, we're getting them ready. If construction is their pathway, you know, we're looking to either place them in another program or connect them with an employer. So it's less linear than a lot of the other job opportunities or training opportunities. Like, you want to be a nurse, okay, do this 2 months of nurse training and go be a nurse. That's not where we started, but we realized there's a demand for it, and we're part of this federal funding is we'll be looking at designing that in a way that both meets the requirements, because Department of Labor is no joke, but it's also taking into account that there's not just one linear path. So my board would be remiss if I didn't ask, if you're interested in supporting the program, there are a lot of ways to connect with us. You donate. We have tons of events in April. We're supporting Urban Gardens with Syracuse Grows and Jubilee Homes. We have an Earth Day tree planting event that's going to be on the east side. We're doing Love My Park Day at Sherwood Park, and a whole bunch of other ones. So also looking at our board, if folks have board experience, come be my boss. But there's a board interest form that's on our website. So
we're changing course here. Strangely enough, in a way, yes, and in a way, no. Because this is really, we really are talking about the same thing in different settings. Okay.
Hi, all.
Hey.
My name is Atana. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. So excited to be with y'all. I'm joined by my colleague Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline, and I'm with Jobs of America. I'm based in Denver, Colorado.
And we are here to chat a little bit today about opportunities with Micron. Our understanding is that you all have been having a lot of conversations about Micron, so our intention is to not tell you about what is happening in your own community, but instead share some resources and some background about what's going on at the federal level, and then a model that, I work with IUE-CWA, we're the manufacturing division of the communication workers. I'm our semiconductors campaign director, and I'm working with Caroline on a potential campaign here in Syracuse to ensure that the benefits that are coming down from the federal and state governments and local government, right, into this community really benefit working class people, benefit our communities, protect the environment, and ensure that there are high quality jobs as we've been promised. So I'm going to just do a little bit of background on my organization. Again, as I mentioned, I work for IUE-CWA. So some of you might have heard about the Communications Workers of America. We're the industrial division, which means we represent the manufacturing workers. Here in town, we represent the workers at Lockheed Martin. If you're familiar with that site, actually our hall is maybe 5 minutes away from where Micron is building in Clay. And CWA represent a variety of workers in industries ranging from airlines to telecommunication. I believe our one of our locals here, CWA 1123, represents Verizon workers. Is that right? Okay, cool. Chris will be upset that I got it wrong. So that's just a little bit of who we are. Slide, please. And we have a long time presence in the industry. So IUE, as I mentioned, is the industrial division of the communications workers, but IUE was its own union for many years, and we merged into CWA in 2000. And IUE stands for the International Union of Electrical Workers with a bunch of other things. And we have been organizing semiconductor workers on the IUE side for many years, as has CWA. And so you'll see the New York Times Environment is a mission at Semitech from October 5th, 1992. So CWA was part of a community campaign back in the late 80s, early 90s, the last time there was a lot of major investment in semiconductor manufacturing to ensure that we were keeping safe working conditions for workers, and had a big win by getting a portion of R&D money coming from the federal government to go to developing the technology necessary for a safe workplace. In addition, we represent on the left, right, the only picture that's up there is our leadership from IUE 88177 in Mountaintop, Pennsylvania. We represent one of the only unionized semiconductor facilities in the country. So this industry is incredibly anti-union, and we have less than 1% union density, but we do represent some of the only unionized workforce workers in the industry. And we also represent workers on the supply chain, throughout the supply chain, one of the only fabs. And then we have workers that are using these semiconductors in applications in a variety of different fields. We're actively organizing in this industry. So there's a supply chain company that was facing massive union busting at Momentum Technologies that we are organizing. We also, since CHIPS Act has been announced or was being discussed, we've been at the forefront of trying to ensure this money goes to good jobs. And last but not least, we actually negotiated the first labor peace agreement in the semiconductor industry in its history last fall with a company in California called Akash Systems. And that was a great example of partnering across the board. So we're representing the workers on the manufacturing side. The construction workers secured a PLA. So it's first in the history for any semiconductor company to have this kind of agreement in manufacturing. And we also, our partners in construction got one on the PLA side. Slide. Okay, CHIPS and Science Act. You've probably seen it a lot in the news. This is just a little bit of a breakdown of the money that we're talking about. So $52 billion is on the chip side of the CHIPS and Science for semiconductor work. $39 billion is in manufacturing. The vast majority of that is going to companies that are actually going to be creating semiconductor fabrication facilities like Micron. And then there's $13 billion in R&D money. In addition to that, no one's been talking about this, but there's another 25% tax credit that companies can apply for that our calculations indicate is another $50 billion, and that's conservatively speaking. So we're looking at over $100 billion of federal investment coming down over the next couple of years in this industry. Slide, please. So when you look at the language of the CHIPS Act, you might hear people refer to a NOFO. It stands for the Notice of Opportunity for Funding. So this is digging into the NOFO for the semiconductor fab that Micron is applying under, because there are multiple NOFOs for multiple rounds of money. This is the one that Micron is applying for. So each applicant must provide a workforce plan and a construction, a workforce plan for the construction side and the facility side. And in it, they say, this is how much we intend to pay people. These are the benefits. This is the scale for advancement, all these different things for workforce. So they have to submit these plans. They also have to submit plans for childcare. So there's a requirement if companies are receiving more than $120 million that they have to provide, I think the language says, access to high quality childcare. What that means, who defines it, all remains to be seen. So one of the challenges with the language of the NOFO right now is companies are just like submitting their plans to Commerce to review, but we don't know what are in the plans until Commerce has decided whether or not they want to give them money. The other thing that's difficult is we don't know how Commerce is evaluating all of these things. So in there, in the NOFO, it says you should talk to unions, you should talk to community partners, but none of that is mandated. And as you see in these graphics at the bottom, on this side are all the different factors that Commerce is taking into consideration when they're looking at an application, including commercial viability, financial strength, workforce development, broader impacts, national and economic security. As you'll see, workforce development is just a small chunk of the 6 big pieces that they're looking at. And then when you look at workforce development, you're looking at needs assessment, recruit and retention, metrics and disclosure. Very little of it is talking about job quality, right? Very little of the focus right now is actually on the quality of the jobs. Pay, culture, right to form unions, benefits, job security, career pathway. So it's one of the challenges that we just need to be aware of is while we know there's opportunity to create good jobs, it is not necessarily Commerce's top priority unless we're the ones really putting the emphasis on that. Slide, please. Okay, the other big thing for us to notice in terms of background is the application steps. So it starts with a statement of interest, then companies submit a pre-application, then a full application, and then, and Micron is in the current stage, they're in the full application period. What's really critical is between full application and the 4th stage of preliminary memorandum of terms, also referred to as a PMT. This is the first time that the Commerce Department will publicly acknowledge that a company has applied. So like, we know Micron has applied, Micron said they've applied, they're out in the community, they're talking about it all the time. Commerce has not said that Micron has applied, they have not talked about their application, and they won't until the PMT is announced. There have only been a couple PMTs that have been announced thus far. I believe it's been 4 so far. We expect Micron will come up very soon. But it's important to understand where we are in the process because it also creates leverage for you all as community members to figure out where are we, where is Commerce, and how do we make sure that they hear our voice. So the next phase is the due diligence period. So once the PMT is announced, Commerce will put out a big public statement. I'm sure Senator Schumer and others will come to Micron. There'll be some kind of event. They'll say, this is great. The government is giving X number of dollars to Micron, or they plan to. This is all non-binding. And that kicks off what's called the due diligence period, which is when the government continues its negotiations with the company. And they also make sure that the things the company said they were going to do, they're actually doing, right? They say, we got this permit, they go check, and they're like, okay, is this a real permit? They said that they've got this program with this community college, they go talk to the community college and they make sure that that's actually happening. Yeah. So this due diligence period can be, we don't know, anywhere between like 3 and 6 months. We don't know how long it's going to be. Commerce has said that some of these bigger projects like Micron, the due diligence period will likely be longer, like on the longer end of, 3 to 6 months. We also know that there is a real drive to get this money out as soon as possible, in part because it's 2024 and the president is running on big pieces of legislation, and the CHIPS Act is one of them. And part of it is also because there's this big drive to get these facilities online as soon as possible. So after the due diligence phase is the final contract. And once the final contract is written and signed, then we're kind of locked in. Like, this is what the company is going to do for this amount of money. And our hope is we can get as much as we possibly can, good language into that contract, because there's pretty good public disclosure language in the NOFO, and that notice of opportunity of funding. So while it's kind of like shady smoke and mirrors, we don't know what's happening with commerce right now. Once the contract is finalized, there should be a good level of public disclosure for what makes it into the contract, which is why, Jobs to Move America and CWA have had many conversations with commerce and submitted several comments where we're saying we want the minimum wages in there, not averages, right? We want the minimum wages and benefits by job classification, so it's easier to hold them accountable instead of just having general information. Slide, please. So in terms of Micron investment, again, I'm probably not saying things y'all don't know. I stole this from Syracuse.com. They're getting a lot of money. We don't know how much is coming from the federal government yet. We're seeing, estimates of about $10 billion. On average, companies are getting about 10%, or they're applying for 10% of their project. And this is a $100 billion project. So it's likely that they're going to be getting around $10 billion. But again, we'll find out with the PMT. New York State has already agreed to give Micron $5.8 billion. 5.5 of that is in tax credits. And then there's $100 million for the Central New York Community Fund and $200 million for infrastructure and road investment around the facility. And then we're seeing upwards of $275 million from the county. And Micron still wants more money. So Micron is in active conversations with the county right now about trying to get more money on top of the $275 that's already there in tax credits. Micron and other semiconductor companies are already going back to Congress and saying we need a CHIPS Act too, we need more money. So they're already looking at getting, $20 billion potentially, 15 to 20, and they still want more. Slide. So one of the reasons why we're here to talk to y'all and learn with and from y'all is because in our positions, we're seeing a real mismatch between the stated priorities of the Biden administration and other elected officials in this area and across the country, and then the record of semiconductor companies, right, and where we've seen their behavior in the past. So the administration has been pretty clear. They want these to be good jobs. They want these to be union jobs. They want them to be family sustaining. They want to make sure that the environment is protected. They want to make sure that investment is going into disinvested communities, specifically communities of color. They want to see strong workforce development pipelines. All those things are very clearly stated from the Biden administration, and I think from elected officials in this area as well, right? These are they want to see strong community investment, all those kinds of things. In reality, the semiconductor industry's record on these things, not so great, right? Low wages, poor working conditions, long history of poisoning workers and the environment. I know there have been previous presentations on this and you all have discussed this, so I'm not going to spend my time on it, but happy to hang afterwards if you're like, I didn't know about any of those things, because we can talk. So we want to bring those into alignment, right? And we see that opportunity is when workers and communities have power, we're able to hold our electeds accountable. And as we articulated earlier, this is our money on the line. So we want to make sure that these things are brought into account and that we apply pressure through the contract period and to the company to be like, cool, you're in our community, you're our neighbor now, what does it mean to show up in that way? And make sure that these things are in alignment. Slide, please. And this is some of the recent PMTs, which I don't want to scare y'all, but I do want to bring attention, as Anne Marie op-ed recently kind of pointed to. We've been promised 50,000 good paying jobs, right? Through the jobs that are invested at Micron and the subsequent jobs that are created as a result. But are the jobs that these companies are creating are actually the high quality ones that they're being promised? So Microchip Technologies in January received a PMT. Again, that's like non-binding. There's still an opportunity to be held accountable there. But a PMT for $162 million. It was celebrated as creating high quality jobs. In reality, workers are making $19 an hour. And they announced pay cuts and massive furloughs less than a week after that announcement was made. So the government says, we're gonna give you all this money. And then the company said, these are tough times. We all have to, you know, pull it together. So massive furloughs were scheduled for March, June, and September. Workers that were not furloughed are getting 10% pay cuts. And executives are saying, well, we're taking it too. We're getting a 20% pay cut, but they just got a huge boost after the PMT was announced in stocks, right? Because the majority of their money comes through stock dividends. Global Foundries in Malta, so in the capital region, it's right outside of Albany. The PMT was announced in February, again, celebrated as creating good jobs, $3.1 billion going to the company. I literally just Googled the day of the PMT, how much do workers make at Global Foundries, and found multiple like job postings for $32,000 a year. So that is how these jobs are being advertised. But again, we see that mismatch. And Intel's announcement was just this past week. So by way of background, all of these companies have been incredibly non-union for a really long time. It's in the DNA of the company, and Bob Noyce was the co-founder of Intel and like one of the fathers of semiconductor manufacturing, said, remaining non-union is an essential for survival for most of our companies. This is a very high priority for management here. So like, it's been clear that they're anti-union. There have been public reports of brutal working conditions, 80-hour plus work weeks, transitioning at a whim between day shift and night shifts as management demanded on call at all times. This is publicly coming from an Intel engineer. They were just awarded $19.5 billion plus the 25% tax credit. So I still need to do the math for how much that likely is. Again, this was all announced on Wednesday for 4 different projects. And we were part of a group that released a press release talking about our concerns with this investment and wanting to make sure that the company remained non-union, paid workers well, environmental concerns, all the things. And when the company was asked to respond to those statements, they said, quote, it is our view that union representation and payment of union dues are not necessary at Intel. And this is despite the president on Wednesday saying he expected in a fact sheet that the company would not union bust. And literally a few hours later, the company is publicly saying that, which we would indicate would be the beginning of union busting. So again, we're just seeing this discrepancy. Slide, please. But it's not all bad, right? Because if it was all bad, we wouldn't be here. I believe, Caroline believes, we're part of a group of folks that really believe that the power of communities and workers will decide whether or not the CHIPS Act benefits us or it does not, right? It all comes down to implementation. But the good news, as you remember from that previous slide, is y'all are at full application. The PMT has not been announced, and once it is announced, you'll have several months in that due diligence phase to make sure that your voices are heard. And then if we can get good things into the contracts, we can then hold the company accountable for it later. This is the model that I'm really excited to kick it to Caroline from Jobs to Move America. We have partnered in the past on previous campaigns where the community and workers have united in a large long-term campaign to get our fair share, and we've won, and we've been successful in that. So would love to dig in with y'all. We'll have plenty of time for questions, but I'm going to kick it to Caroline to talk about the model to win.
Okay, folks, community benefits agreements, that is my subject today. We center communities, workers, and the environment when we do community benefits agreements. So who is Jobs to Move America? What do we even do? That text is missing now, but I will tell you.
Oh, there it is.
The Jobs to Move America works to transform public spending and corporate behavior using a comprehensive approach. So it's rooted in racial and economic justice and community organizing. That's really critical. So we seek to advance a fair and prosperous economy with good jobs and healthier communities for all. So we believe, pretty simple, that public purchasing, so when the government spends public dollars, whose dollars? They're your dollars, right? Then it should create public benefits for you, for the community. And so this exchange is something that that we think it's very simple as a concept, and we're putting it into reality. And that's here in Syracuse. I got that off the internet, but where is that? It's beautiful.
Downtown. Thanks.
Oh,
The old, where the old Erie Canal.
love
And put it down.
it. So what is a community benefits agreement? Again, it's a concept of community benefits. So it's a simple proposition, right? That economic development, its main purpose is to bring measurable and specific permanent improvements to the lives of impacted residents, especially historically underrepresented and marginalized groups and communities. So what is a CBA? Here's the gist. It is a legally binding document between the company and a community coalition. So we hold CBAs with manufacturers. Some of them are rail. I'll talk about an electric bus company in a minute here. Currently 3 of the largest electric bus manufacturers have CBAs with us. And our CBAs are driven by our coalitions. And that's so critical and important to us. Sometimes national organizations will just parachute in to save the day, and tell you what Syracuse needs. But we know that you all are the experts on your community. And so you know what benefits the community should get. And then our CBAs usually have specific focus on career pathways, creating pathways for high quality jobs, again, for historically underrepresented communities. And they contain commitments to card check neutrality. Do folks know what that is? All right, we got a room of informed folks. So like Thomas said, folks are, what was the first Global Foundries says, oh yeah, we're gonna have all these great paying jobs and everything, and it's gonna be great for you guys. And then they go and do all these furloughs and everything right away. Same thing happens with union busting. They'll say, it's even, Biden says you have to do this, they say we will. And then more often than not, they lie. That's exactly right. We're getting all these like sweet promises and sweet ideas, right? And unionizing is one of those. We make sure that that right to organize is protected with the company. Shifting power with the community benefits agreement. So this image here is about fundamentally changing the relationship businesses have to or over communities. So you see here we have the different groups of people that come together, unions, environmental groups, neighborhood groups, etc. And then you see with the community benefits agreement, there's an exchange of power. So normally what you might see is that the power of the community goes to the city, and the city takes that power of the community and gives it to the developer. But with a CBA, you see that's the joining piece right there. We now have a mutual relationship with the company, and we're holding them accountable. So we're bringing workers and communities to the table to ensure they have a say in the decision-making process. Too often, communities are left out, and communities are the folks, again, who are directly impacted and who will benefit from these things. So making sure that folks have a say in the decision-making process is really central to the CBA. So what are the benefits of CBAs? Again, it's a seat at the table with communities pointing to what they, so communities can point to the benefits that they deserve and demand. Shared decision-making, again, very important. Job quality, access. I think Greg talked about targeted hire a little bit. It's so important that workers come from the community where the company is. We focus again on historically underrepresented folks, so that's BIPOC folks, people who are reentering the community. And we make sure that we have training and apprenticeship for industry recognized certification and language justice. I think this is something that's really critical. It's not something we hear all the time, but just because you're monolingual in another language doesn't mean you shouldn't have access to the information you need and be involved in these decision-making processes. So language justice is important. Worker voice and behaviors. So we're talking about behaviors in the context of like, what is Micron doing, right? So we have environmental concerns. We can't coordinate with the company now, everything's secret, right? And information sharing, that's all about transparency. We need there to be clear information coming from Micron to the community. So we use the CBA to build community power and worker power. So sometimes we think about it as a worker thing, but it's everybody we're talking about. So CBA negotiation process. First, it's research. So we have an amazing researcher at JMA called Anna Smith. You'll probably see her around in the future. But she is just looking and digging for everything we can find out about Micron. And that information is going to be critical, and that intel from the ground is going to be critical when we go to the table, so we know what we're doing so that we can plan to strategize and strategize. Then the coalition itself, remember I told you it is community-led. And so the coalition identifies the CBA elements together. And then we do education around the benefits of partnership. We have clearly defined roles and responsibilities in the coalition. So folks have a stake, they are invested, and they're also supported in what they're doing on the coalition. There are always regular coalition meetings to plan for the negotiations. Once you go to the table, you can't really change things, so you gotta be ready. Prioritizing elements, and so this is making sure that the community is able to assess the challenges and then be able to say, you know, like housing is a priority, so here's a housing piece to the CBA. Results and implementation. So we don't have time to go through all of this. But something that I want to highlight is over here in 2022, the New Flyer campaign was multi-state. So we worked with a coalition in Alabama to reach this community benefits agreement with the largest manufacturer of electric buses in the nation. And it's binding across the US. So that's really exciting. Similar elements to previous CBAs, there's usually a common thread. And this is a great one. 20% of internal promotion is a goal for workers of color. So that's measurable and specific, right? And then 45% of new hires are to be for workers of color. There's also an anti-harassment third-party hotline. And, you know, we talk about this a lot, the pre-apprenticeship that qualifies folks to get into apprenticeship programs and really move toward that good job and good career. All right, why don't we take a vote? I want to know what matters to you. So raise your hand if you are concerned about equity. All right, I was going to count hands down because I figured we would single people out. What about the economy? Is that something that Syracusans care about? How about environment? Yeah, that's a big one. And then housing. I'm hearing that a lot. Yeah, housing is a really big concern. So what other issues are important to you? Those are just a few. Or if you have specific examples of something from one of those issues. Yeah.
Transportation.
Yes.
Transportation?
You bet, because a lot of the potential workforce, that's where money finds, how many students, does not have reliable transportation to get to work. And I think that would be a new issue down the road.
That's right.
It's a problem now. It's a problem now.
That's right. And folks commute.
Well, it's everything is 2 buses, you take a bus. Or
You said especially for workers, like transportation, general issue, but specifically for workers, he's concerned about. Yep, okay.
I would say about buses, there's a significant lack of drivers in ridership, so we can increase both of those things, buses will get better. But what I'm concerned about is education. I keep hearing a lot that the good paying jobs that will become available are for engineers or other professional roles, and that those roles will, that folks are coming from out of the area will have those positions. Yeah, so I'm make sure that we can get.
Bucks brings the, we have a immigrant population. And they're being, as several people put it, they're gonna be left behind again.
May I ask a clarifying question? Did you also care about local hire when you were talking about the pathways for education? Is that another priority?
It's also important for the city of Syracuse and for the rest of the counties.
Thank you.
Water, here in Great Lakes, we can have about 20% of the world potable water. And as far as I'm concerned, that belongs to the world. And Micron should know. Do anything to raise that water.
This kind of happens to a lot of intersectional land use, especially the transportation, like you look at what's the one vendor in Micron sitting out, like their factories and like acres and acres of surface parking lots, so that tells me that they assume 90+% of the workforce will be driving there, which is then gonna just spur, I feel there's not gonna be a farm, forest, or field, more than kind of be plowed for a subdivision or a strip mall, and further perpetuate the sprawl, making it harder and harder to actually build buses and connect everybody. So like, just the whole vision is just like, oh.
That's right. That's right.
I'm very concerned with worker safety.
These are dangerous jobs. And we have the opportunity to focus on safety and ensure that they actually are safe jobs.
Hi, my name is Felix. I'm concerned with like displaced animals. They're going to be tearing down a lot of like wetlands, a lot of forestry. That's going to displace like thousands and thousands of animals a month.
Yep, yeah, and there's a huge piece of the wetlands that's being built over, right? It's your wetlands.
Yeah.
And did you?
Thank you. Just to piggyback off of that, it's 244 acres of what's defined as wetlands, and then there's land around that which is not official wetlands, but it's wet. It's natural wetlands. So chemicals figure into worker safety, but also figure into transportation, safe transportation of chemicals to the site. 3, the emergency responders have to deal with chemicals. If there's spills, if there's fires, if there's whatever.
Really important.
And the chemical issue, of course, crops up in environmental protection, air emissions, water emissions.
Yeah, so I would say population growth and particularly the supply of medical care. According to you. Nobody seems to be talking about that type of impact and how we're going to deal with it.
That's all right. And, you know, occupational health is going to be central here too. These have to be good jobs with good supports and good, safety nets. I'm reminded of something Don shared with me, and that's the number of parking spaces that are going to be at Micron and the doom that that portends. They may be thousands, right? 12,000. Rather have the wetlands, right? Yes, John, you already read it.
So I have a more fundamental question about the beyond the issues, which is how does a CBA come about and what is the leverage that would drive Onondaga County government, which is totally Republican and anti-labor, anti-union, to force Micron to engage with the community to do a CBA? In the first question, in other words, how do you make this happen, to me, is the ultimate and fundamental question. Because all this conversation means nothing if the county just doesn't deal with Micron and it's over.
A couple of things. The big thing for me is the word public. These are public dollars, and it's a public campaign, right? Micron's really good at PR. They want to look good, and we can use the media, the public to push back. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, there are two timelines for leverage. Do you mind if I?
Go.
Yeah. Okay, so there's two bites of the apple here. The first is this moment before the contract gets signed with the federal government. So as Caroline said, Anna's doing all the research, right? Like, I don't know the details yet, and I'm hoping some folks here might, so we can talk about this afterwards. Otherwise, our researcher is going to keep Googling. But like where things are at with the 5.5 billion for New York State, right? Like these are contracts. So has the money been given yet? Is it truncated? What does that look like? The money to Onondaga County, like what does that look like? The federal government has not given Micron a dime. I'll say that again. The federal government has not given Micron a dime. They haven't even announced how much they are going to give to the company yet. So if we go back, actually, let me go back. That slide, remember we were talking about those different steps? We are pre-PMT. Once the PMT is announced, it'll be public. How much leverage you all decide, and one of the reasons why we want to know your issues is one, because as Caroline says, we don't want to parachute in. Like if folks are like, Micron is great and everything's good and like we're good, we'll be like, cool, see you later. But it sounds like there are some issues that folks might want to organize around. So how organized we are, how public we are, as Caroline said, how much pressure we are applying matters as the federal government is currently negotiating this, right? Like I personally, CWA, actually I shouldn't talk I personally, CWA, the organization that I represent on stage, has endorsed Biden, right? It's 2024. We know this is an important political moment. We will continue to support President Biden, but whoever is in office, we also want to continue to hold them accountable to the things that they say. So this is a moment where there is a lot of potential leverage there that, you know, Biden wants to win and he wants to win on chips. So we're like, cool, make it the things that you say it's going to. The community is saying they want this. That's the only reason why the president said on Wednesday that Intel wasn't going to union bus is because we've been banging on his door being like, yo, these companies are doing these things. You need to get them to do more. You need to get them to commit. And now we're saying a commitment is not enough unless it's in writing. So the leverage that you all can apply, I don't think it's on just the county right now, because it sounds like some of that money has potentially already gone out, but it's the federal government, which is one bite of the apple. The second is what Jobs to Move America has so much expertise in, which is the contract part, right? Once we get this money into the contract, it's about making sure that they are held accountable to it. So you can continue to apply pressure. So New Flyer, it took us 6 years. Like we didn't just get that New Flyer CBA. It took like 6 years of organizing, getting a good contract, having a community campaign, building up leverage. The company didn't do things that they were supposed to. We held them accountable to it. So that's like, it's long term. So we see two bites of the apple for leverage. What can we do in this moment before the contract is signed? What can we do after the contract is signed? Because there will be public disclosure of the things that they commit to do.
It's very old-fashioned politics here. We have a community group, if you know, right, from the newspaper 20 who helped Micron.
There's no labor union on that, and when I brought that up at a meeting, because we understand the workforce, we know a lot of these problems, right? We know what good jobs are. And they said, oh yeah, there are. The only unions are the trade union, the construction workers. Now, I love the construction workers. The only reason they've been a part of this so far, and again, they're not talking about every single mother getting a job in construction, right? That's a limited bunch of jobs for a limited amount of time. They immediately said to me, we are working with the unions. I said, cool, because I don't know, I represent the hotel and restaurant workers, but I'm also the regional president of the AFL-CIO, which represents all the unions. And we want, part of what we want, I don't mean to overstep what you said, but we don't just want jobs for the groups who have not had opportunity. We want equal opportunity for the whole community. And that might be retraining, that might be a little bit of English learning. Because for instance, at the Hotel Syracuse, I have a family doctor trained in Cuba who's an immigrant, and she's cleaning rooms. Because she didn't have the money to go back to school, which is how you get certified in the United States. A family doctor, and my understanding is Cuba has one of the best training programs. And then with the power of, the unions are powerless unless the community's behind them. But I feel like this is a moment because I'm really concerned about this town making decisions by corporate people who only have one thing in mind. And I will tell you this about unions. If anyone ever says to you, we can't afford, but you go to a union hotel and you go to a non-union hotel. The only difference is the more of the money you spend there, which is probably the same price either way, goes in the pockets of the workers and not only the owner, or the developer.
Yeah, and whoever is interested in knowing more, we love your contact information so we can keep in touch with you, particularly as things start to gain momentum and if y'all want a coalition forms.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. My first ask would be that you sign the paper so we can follow up. Because as Caroline and I shared earlier, this is probably the most talking we will do all week long. We're really on a listening tour to better understand what are the issues that folks have, what are the things that people want to do, who should we be talking to. So we'd love to hear from y'all, like who should we be talking to?
Yeah.
Another thing that goes back to maybe Dick's question, but one of my concerns, I've been at a number of the environmental meetings with Micron, and not only in our local government, but state government and kind of the regulating agencies' capacity is, I'm really concerned about. Like, are they going to be able to keep up and keep Micron accountable? Like all of their sustainability stuff is like, refer to local entity that's in charge of managing this. And that seemed very inadequate. And so I'm worried about our capacity to have the resources in government.
And it's possible. I think that's like the piece that I'm hearing is a consistent trend, right? Is that we have real concerns and we want to do something about it. And when we are strategic and we're acting together and we're reaching out to diverse coalitions in the area, like as you're saying, yeah, they probably don't have enough capacity. The question is, are they going to have to increase capacity if we put leverage to get there? Yeah, my understanding is a lot of the jobs that are going to be created for Micron are also like public improvement jobs because of all the regulation around all of this stuff. But it's up to y'all, right? I think that's what we're hoping to hear. Question.
Have you been able to have stated in your work to create strong, independent oversight committees for the kinds of issues and places that you mentioned? Because that is exactly what's needed. And will you help us with that? Is that part of what you're here to do?
So it's a great question. And I'll kick it to Caroline if you know more about oversight. The model that we've worked with in the past has more been focused on these CBAs, these community benefits agreements. And one of the big reasons why, and I've heard this a little bit from your comment in the back of like, you're saying things, some of it they're taking into consideration, some of it they're not, is when we can get to the table and negotiate, it's our own enforceable contract with the company. So instead of it just being like, oversight of a governmental agency and we're trying to influence the governmental agency. That line that Caroline was talking about really puts the power in, we have an enforceable agreement with the company in addition to the ones that the government has with the company. So that's the model that we work with. It's a legally enforceable binding contract.
It's really important.
Yeah. That is the key, right? I am not interested in promises and I'm not interested in well wishes. I'm interested in like real accountability and mechanisms for real accountability. And that is the model that JMA has developed and that we've worked with them in the past.
We have a police accountability board and they're toothless, right? So it doesn't matter how many of these you have, if you don't have any power to really make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do with the agreement.
Yep, and that is why instead of getting like an oversight body, the goal, at least for us, and if folks are interested in something else, we could definitely talk about it or explore it. But the expertise that Jobs to Move America brings to the table is an enforceable, binding legal agreement. And it's a private agreement between the company and the coalition, which allows it to be legally enforceable.
Welcome and thank you.
Onondaga County. Onondaga County is run, the legislature is Republican run. And here's the thing, this is a little offshoot related, but small compared to what you're talking about. I wanted to be on the county library board. I submitted my curriculum vitae, letters of recommendation, filled out the form online. This is in October. They said, wait till after the election. Okay, wait till after the election. Election happened. Nothing happened. And then, does everybody here know Mo Brown, who is our wonderful county legislator? Well, he found out that 4 names were submitted. It's a political appointment. 4 names were submitted to be approved for the library board. I was not one of them. And just for the record, I'm a librarian, a Fulbright scholar, former president of the New York Library Association, worked in public libraries. I have a CV that goes like forever.
You're a Democrat.
And not only that, I'm on the Democratic committee, which I'm not changing my party for the county, that's for sure. But this is an example of the wall that you mentioned that we come up against. And here's the thing. One of the 4 people that was listed to be on the library board is Esteban Gonzalez. Does that name ring a bell? He is the person who lost the election for sheriff, has no expertise in libraries and no interest in libraries that I know of. That, I mean, I looked at his resume, they're online. So here's, I mean, the recommendation for these 4 people goes to Ways and Means Committee, which meets next Tuesday. I'm going to be going to that meeting. I'm not going to ask you guys to go to the Ways and Means Committee meeting. That's too much to ask. However, April 2nd is the full session of the county legislature. 1 o'clock and down in what's 401 Montgomery Street. I would love it if everybody turned out, come early before 1 so you can sign up to speak and speak in my behalf. And if anybody wants to be totally bored, I would be glad to give you my resume.
Like letters to the expert, because this is the first time that they're doing something for this Esteban that lost the election.
Yeah, I'll write lots. I'm asking you to write lots. Overlook someone with extensive experience, a real interest in public service,
and has put forth enormous effort to volunteer for that. I have no idea. So, I mean, and the response, this is what Mo told me when I talked to him on Friday. He had talked to someone from the county executive's office, and they said, oh, she can be on another board. It's like, what do I know about transportation? I will lobby for this, but I don't know about, as an example, the transportation board to sit on the board. But the bigger issue, that this is just political corruption at work, political corruption at work. And I'm asking you to write emails, to turn up on April 2nd. Be there at 12:30 so you can get your name on the speaking list and speak in my behalf. And also speak to the larger issue of the way things are done in Onondaga County.